Hello everyone and welcome to this week's game devlog on The Stars Our Destination, a turn-based strategy flight game. Got a lot of little colorful things to show this time around. Let's get into it. Got some fair critiques on the dash attack from last week. Sometimes it looked more like a charge shot than a ship heading towards enemies. I added a bit more particles at the end of the wings, and the wings themselves slightly animate in and out to really sell it. Now it looks like it. After that, I made a separate object pool for the particles, which for now is just the explosion particle. I had two reasons for doing this. First was to make it easier to edit the explosion particle from the project window. Originally, they were just children of the object and they would call them when they die, but this made it very inconvenient when I had to make the slightest change to the explosion, where I would have to go to each prefab and apply the changes. With objects calling the particle pool for which particle they want, I don't need the children anymore. I can just edit the source from the project window and it will affect all of them. The other reason was to adapt to object sizes. The explosion isn't a one-size-fits-all, and now there's a parameter to change the particle size depending how big the object is. And speaking of the explosion, I increased the animation speed to keep pace with the rest of the game so it doesn't feel awkward. Thank you for the feedback, Sylvester. A few weeks ago, I made a point on how the lighting on the ship was instantaneous and a little unnatural. I couldn't tell if people would actually notice and I was worrying over nothing. But that doesn't matter because I found a way to fix it and it's smoother and better than ever. I actually didn't know that Blender would affect the lighting of the model until a colleague enlightened me about the process and this little feature called Auto Smooth. In addition to that, the process of cleaning up the model to include more triangles and quads to get that consistent lighting I wanted, along with some sharp markings and tidying up the UVs. Steps I carried over to the wandering enemy model. While admittedly it has less going on than the player ship model despite the poly count, but the point still stands. The pipeline is working and I implemented it into my wandering enemy prefab. The problem I foresee right now is visibility. Either I need to edit the enemy color palette or the skybox's color palette. Either way, I'll think of something. By far, the biggest step this week was making more defined art assets for the strategy screen. It was less about getting finished assets and more about building a 2D pipeline. Everything was made in A-Sprite. The background was just a backdrop, and the stars were made via light use of the spray tool, and copy, pasting, flipping, and moving it to make it more seamless. The nebula was a little tricky. Looking at photographs of hyper-realistic renderings of nebulas was not gonna help here. Looking at other pixel art renderings was a little better, but more varied, but making them is much harder than it looks. I would have so many false starts experimenting with dithering, opacity filtering, pillow shading, but it always looked like blobby goop. After looking at a few more references, specifically Star Fox 2, again, I tried covering the entire background with a combination of pillow shading, blur, jumble, and opacity filtering. I honestly don't know how lookable it looks to other people, but it's the result I was most happy with, aside from the inconsistent pixel size. Other than that, I made a sprite animation for the cursor and a sprite for the player ships. I need to resize them and make the player ships pop out more in the background, and also a sprite for the enemy ships too. Obviously, these aren't final, but the point is I got a foundation and I know what to improve on. Other suggestions for improvement is especially welcome here. Last week I said I got the battle theme implemented into a DAW, and started on a potential strategy theme, but after feedback from both trained and non-trained sources, I kinda decided to go with the advice, don't settle on your first idea. I started both themes again. The battle theme is much faster now with more musical consistency and feels more like a space battle, at least rhythmically. Take a listen. And the potential strategy theme isn't dreary drudge anymore, and has more of a harmonic wave progression. This time though, I unified them with a potential leitmotif, a musical technique that goes back a long way. It's basically a piece of music that's supposed to represent a person, place, thing, action, whatever it might be for story purposes. Think the Force theme in Star Wars.
Come here, my little friend. Don't be afraid. Oh, don't worry, he'll be all right. Use the Force, Luke. Let go, Luke.
The Force is strong in this one.
Luke, trust me.
In this case, it's going to be called the battle leitmotif for now since both pieces have commonality with conflict. Let me know what you think. For next week, I'm going to be trying to develop the music more, tidy up the strategy screen assets, get the aggro enemy model, and maybe integrate on-rails mode to be triggerable in the strategy screen. It's exciting to see the game visually progress after using prototype assets for so long. That'll be it for this week. Subscribe or join the Discord server if you like what I'm doing. Let me know if you have any questions or feedback. Take care of yourselves and have a good week.